For new parents, the baby monitor is a promise, a fragile shield of technology offering peace of mind. It's an electronic umbilical cord stretching through the darkened halls of a home, connecting them to the most precious thing in their world. But what happens when that connection becomes a conduit? What happens when the whispers meant to soothe are not your own, and the clicks and the static are not the settling of a house, but the stirring of an unseen cradle robber? For one father, the device meant to guard his child's sleep became a window into a nightmare, forcing him to ask a question from which there is no escape. Let's begin the story. Get comfortable and listen closely. The house at 2:17 a.m. was a cathedral of silence, and Tom was its sole sleepless monk. His vigil was held not before an altar, but before the 5-inch screen of the Owlet baby monitor. Its soft, blue-white glow painted his face in the chaotic dark of the living room, a landscape of half-empty mugs, discarded burp cloths, and stacks of books on infant care that felt uselessly academic now. On the screen, a grainy night vision image showed his daughter, Lily, a tiny, perfect bundle in the center of her crib. The monitor's small green light pulsed in time with her breathing, a fragile metronome counting out the beats of his heart. Exhaustion was a physical weight, pressing down on his eyelids and turning his bones to lead. Upstairs, his wife, Anna, was finally asleep, her body a battlefield recovering from the brutal siege of a C-section. She was a doctor, a woman of science and steady hands, but the complicated birth had left her pale and immobile, confined to their bed. The night watch was his. All of it. He welcomed the burden, the fierce, primal need to protect, overwhelming his own body's screaming protest for rest. He was a coder by trade, a man who built logical systems from chaos, but this new variable, this tiny, helpless human, had short-circuited his entire world. Every sound from the monitor's speaker was a subject for intense analysis. A gurgle. Was she spitting up? A soft sigh, a dream, or a prelude to a wail? He'd lean in, his ear inches from the speaker, parsing the gentle hiss of the white noise machine for any deviation. It was the modern parent's mantra. Is she breathing? Is she okay? Let me just check. He'd watch the graph of her oxygen levels, the number of her heart rate, trusting the technology more than his own senses. It was in the deepest trough of the night, around 3:30 a.m., when the world outside was utterly still, that he heard it. Amidst the soft shush of the noise machine and Lily's rhythmic puffing, there was another sound. Click. It was faint, dry, and organic. It wasn't the click of a relay in the monitor itself, nor the pop of the house's old timbers settling. It wasn't the scuttle of a cockroach or the tick of a radiator. It was a single, isolated, articulated sound, like a knuckle cracking in a silent room. Tom sat bolt upright, his wariness vaporized by a pinprick of adrenaline. He stared at the screen. Lily hadn't moved. The audiograph showed no spike. He rewound the video feed a few seconds, a feature he'd paid extra for. He played it back, cranking the volume. He heard the white noise, Lily's breath, and then nothing. The sound hadn't been recorded. It's nothing, he told himself, his programmer's mind racing for a logical explanation. Auditory pareidolia. Your brain is tired, it's filling in the gaps in the static. He took a slow breath, forcing the tension from his shoulders. He'd been awake for nearly 20 hours. Of course he was hearing things. He drank the last of his cold coffee and settled back into the couch, his eyes glued once more to the screen. An hour later, as the first hint of gray began to soften the blackness outside, he heard it again. This time, it was different. Click, click. A deliberate doublet. Closer, it seemed. Sharper. He didn't move this time. He just listened, his entire being focused on the small black speaker. He strained his ears, trying to hear past the manufactured calm of the white noise machine. He imagined the sound's origin. It was the sound of a fingernail tapping on hard plastic, perhaps, or two small stones being struck together. He held his breath, waiting for a third, but it didn't come. Only the gentle tide of the white noise and the impossibly precious sound of his daughter's breathing. The seed of unease, planted an hour before, had begun to sprout a thin, cold root in the pit of his stomach. The sun was still an hour away, and the night had never felt so long. The following night, Tom armed himself with a thermos of black coffee and a renewed, albeit anxious, determination. Anna had been lucid for a few hours that evening, smiling weakly as he'd placed Lily in her arms. Seeing them together, his two girls solidified his purpose. He was the guardian at the gate. He'd almost convinced himself the clicks were a phantom of his fatigue, but then, around 1 a.m., they returned. This time, they weren't isolated events. They were a pattern. A soft, rhythmic click, 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 click. It was a quiet, intricate percussion hidden just beneath the threshold of the white noise, a sound you could only hear if you were listening for it. He muted the monitor, the clicking stopped. He unmuted it, the clicking was back. It was real. It was coming from her room. He felt a cold sweat prickle his neck. It sounded like chittering, the dry, unnerving sound of a large insect, perhaps, hidden somewhere in the nursery. A cicada, maybe. No, it was winter. A beetle in the walls? The rhythm was too complex, too deliberate. And then he heard the other sound. It started as a subtle modulation in the static, a sibilant hiss that rose and fell. It wasn't a word. It was a sound of comfort, twisted and made alien. A soft, drawn-out shh. It wasn't the white noise machine. That was a constant, oceanic roar. This was separate. It was directional. It was intimate. It was a whisper. Tom's blood ran cold. Anna was deeply asleep beside him in their bed, a low, rumbling snore confirming it. Lily, a newborn, could not make that sound. His heart hammered against his ribs. Someone was in the nursery. Someone was standing over her daughter's crib and shushing her. He moved without thinking, slipping out of bed with the predator's silence. The floorboards were icy beneath his bare feet. He crept down the hallway, each step an eternity. He didn't turn on the light. He pressed his ear to the nursery door, hearing only the muffled sound of the white noise machine from within. No whispering, no clicking. Taking a steadying breath, he turned the knob with excruciating slowness and pushed the door open a crack. The room was bathed in the pale orange glow of a single nightlight. He could see the perfect silhouette of the crib, the mobile of friendly felt animals hanging motionless above it. The air was still and warm, and the room was silent, save for the hum of the machine and Lily's soft, sleeping breaths. He scanned every corner, his eyes probing the shadows under the changing table, behind the rocking chair. Nothing. The window was locked. The closet door was shut. The room was empty, secure. He retreated, his mind a maelstrom of confusion and fear, and quietly shut the door. Back in the living room, he stared at the monitor. The whispering was gone. The chittering was gone. There was only the sound of his daughter sleeping peacefully. The next morning, as he helped Anna with her breakfast, he told her. He tried to sound calm, rational. "I think there's something wrong with the monitor. Last night I heard noises, clicking and a sort of whispering sound like someone was shushing her. Anna looked at him, her eyes full of a mixture of love and weary concern. "Tom, honey," she said gently, her voice raspy. "You've been on duty for 48 hours straight. Sleep deprivation is a beast. It can cause auditory hallucinations. I saw it all the time with interns on 36-hour shifts." She reached out, her hand cool on his. Maybe the monitor picked up a stray signal, a neighbor's cordless phone, or another baby monitor. It happens. Her logic was sound, infuriatingly so, but it didn't feel right. It felt like a dismissal of a danger she couldn't see. "I went in there, Anna. I heard it. And then I went into the room, and there was nothing." "Exactly," she said, her voice soft. "It was the machine, Tom, or it was your head. Please, try to get some sleep today. For me. For Lily." He agreed, but the anxiety didn't subside. Later that day, while Anna and Lily napped, he took the baby monitor apart. He checked the frequency settings, changing them from the default channel. He repaired the camera and the parent unit. He went online and checked for firmware updates, installing the latest version. He tested every function. The microphone was crisp, the speaker clear, the connection stable. He could find absolutely nothing technically wrong with the device. And that, more than anything, terrified him. The problem wasn't a glitch in the machine. It was a feature of the silence it was supposed to be guarding. The entity, if that's what it was a fast learner. The third night marked a horrifying evolution. The random chittering and the simple shushing were gone, replaced by something far more insidious: mimicry. It began subtly. Tom was listening intently, his body strung tight as a guitar spring, when he noticed the pitch of the white noise machine seemed to waver. It would dip, just for a second, into a slightly lower register before correcting itself. He thought it was a power fluctuation, but then it happened again, and this time he recognized the cadence. It was mimicking the shush sound he had heard the night before, weaving its own whisper into the fabric of the machine's sound, a parasitic harmony. An hour later, Lily let out a soft, sleepy coo. A few seconds passed, and then, from the monitor's speaker, Tom heard it again, a coo. But it was wrong. It was a hollow echo, devoid of life. It had the same pitch and duration, but underneath it was a faint, dry, rustling texture, like dead leaves skittering across pavement. It was a perfect imitation, stripped of all warmth, a soulless reflection. Tom felt a wave of nausea. This thing was listening. It was learning. It was trying to communicate in the only language the nursery offered. The terror reached its apex just after 2 a.m. The day before, Anna had felt strong enough to have Lily on the bed with her for a while, and she had hummed a lullaby. It was a simple, rambling tune she'd made up on the spot. Tom had been sitting right there, watching them, his heart aching with love. Now, in the dead of night, he heard that same tune drift from the monitor. It wasn't Anna. She was snoring softly beside him. It was a fragmented, whisper-thin rendition of the lullaby, hummed in that same dry, sibilant tone. It was a mockingbird of nightmares, stealing the most precious, intimate sounds of his family and twisting them into something profane. It was a violation of a memory that was less than a day old. He snatched his phone, his hands shaking. He had to get proof. He held the phone's microphone up to the monitor's speaker, his thumb hovering over the record button. The humming continued, a ghostly, ethereal tune. He hit record. He captured 30 seconds of the sound before it faded back into the static. His heart pounded as he stopped the recording and hit play. He pressed the phone to his ear. Static. He played it again, turning the phone's volume to maximum. He could hear the distinct hiss of the white noise machine, captured perfectly. He could even hear a faint pop as Lily shifted in her sleep. But the humming, the clear, terrifying, mimicked lullaby, was completely gone. There was no trace of it. It was as if it existed only in the space between the monitor speaker and his eardrum, a phenomenon that refused to be documented. that defied objective proof. It was its only audience. The realization sent a fresh wave of panic through him. It was isolating him, trapping him in a reality no one else could share. He looked at the video feed, his eyes scanning for any clue, and that's when he saw it. Lily, who had been sound asleep, was now stirring. She wasn't crying or fussing. Her tiny head was turned slightly on the mattress, her eyes closed, but she seemed to be listening. A small, subtle shift in her blankets occurred at the exact moment the phantom humming had been at its peak. She settled again as it faded. She could hear it. She wasn't afraid of it. She was responding to it as if it were a familiar comfort. The thing in her room was learning to sound like her mother, and it was working. The thought was so horrifying that Tom had to clap his hand over his mouth to stifle a cry, the sound of his own ragged breath suddenly deafening in the silence. A week of this auditory torture began to corrode Tom's sanity. Sleep was a forgotten luxury, replaced by micro-naps on the couch that offered no rest, only jarring awakenings to phantom clicks and whispers that now echoed in his mind even when the monitor was muted. The world took on a fuzzy, unreal quality. He was jumpy, irritable. The chime of a text message made him flinch. He'd snap at Anna over small things, a misplaced bottle, a question asked at the wrong time. The tension in the house became a palpable thing. Anna's concern for him had curdled into deep worry. "Tom, this isn't healthy," she said one afternoon, her face etched with exhaustion and fear, not of a ghost, but for her husband. "I think you might have postpartum anxiety. It happens to fathers too. We can call Dr. Miller. We can get you some help." "It's not in my head, Anna," he shot back, his voice louder than he intended. He saw the hurt in her eyes and immediately deflated. "I'm sorry. I'm just so tired and so scared." "I know," she whispered, her own eyes welling up. "But you're scaring me too." That night, the entity grew bold. The clicking was no longer a subtle rhythm. It was a frantic, insistent tapping, like a trapped bird beating its beak against glass. It was so loud, Tom was sure it would wake Anna. Then came a new sound, a low, guttural scraping from the monitor, like furniture being dragged across a wooden floor. Tom's obsession had become a ritual. Hear the sound, check the video, see nothing, suffer. But this time was different. The scraping sound was loud, visceral. He couldn't stay on the couch. He bolted from the living room and tore down the hall, his heart a frantic drum. He threw open the nursery door, expecting to confront an intruder, a burglar, anything tangible. The room was still. Lily was asleep. Nothing was out of place, except for one thing. The window was open. Just a crack, maybe 2 inches, but it was unmistakably ajar. A sliver of frigid night air sliced into the warm room, carrying the scent of damp earth and cold asphalt. He froze, his mind refusing to process what he was seeing. He was meticulous about that window. He had a child's safety lock on it, a plastic clamp that required 2 hands and significant pressure to release. He checked it every single night before putting Lily down. He knew it had been locked. He rushed to the window, his breath pluming in the cold draft. He examined the frame, the lock. There were no marks, no scratches, no sign of forced entry. It was as if someone had simply willed it open from the inside. This was the tipping point. A sound could be a hallucination. A mimic could be a radio interference. But a locked window opening on its own was a physical event. It was real. It was an intrusion. His hands shaking, he slammed the window shut and engaged the lock, pushing on it until his knuckles turned white. He stood there for a long moment, staring out into the blackness of the backyard, feeling watched. Back in the eerie blue light of the living room, his fear turned into frantic action. He grabbed his laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. He ignored the generic tech support pages. He dove deep into the unlit corners of the internet, parenting forums from a decade ago, paranormal message boards, forgotten blogs. Strange clicking sound on baby monitor. Whispering on my summer infant monitor. My baby monitor is haunted. Most results were dead ends, stories of picking up truckers on CB radios or neighbors' arguments. But then he found them. A handful of scattered, terrified posts, like messages in a bottle washed up from a sea of static. A mother in Ohio in 2012 describing a voice that mimicked her own humming. A father in Oregon in 2015 who heard chitinous clicking and whose son would seem to listen to the walls. A post from the UK simply titled The Crib Whisker that described an unseen presence that seemed to soothe the infant with copied sounds, a presence the parents felt was feeding. They were all dismissed by other posters as paranoid, sleep-deprived, or in need of psychiatric help. But Tom knew. He wasn't crazy. He wasn't alone. And the thing in his daughter's room had a history. The discovery of other accounts didn't bring comfort. It brought a more focused terror. The entity was no longer just a sound. It was a phenomenon, a predator with a pattern. And now it seemed to know it was being watched with a new kind of awareness. The video feed, once a stable, if grainy, window into the nursery, began to act strangely. The anomalies were brief, easy to miss if you weren't staring with the obsessive focus of a man on the edge. When the chittering sound started, the image on the monitor would flicker. A band of pixelation would wash across the screen. Sometimes, the colors would desaturate for a split second, plunging the room into a stark, monochromatic landscape before bleeding back into the sickly green of the night vision. They were visual glitches that perfectly corresponded with the auditory intrusions. The entity's presence was so potent it was distorting the electronic signal, bleeding through the very technology meant to observe it. Tom sat hunched on the couch, his phone ready, hoping to capture one of these glitches. He knew a recording of the sound was impossible, but maybe, just maybe, he could catch the video. The whispering began, a soft, sibilant melody that sounded disturbingly like a distorted version of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. He aimed his phone at the monitor screen, his thumb on the record button. And then he saw it. It wasn't a glitch. On the wall behind Lily's crib, a shadow was moving. It wasn't the shadow of the mobile, which hung perfectly still. It wasn't cast by the nightlight. It had no discernible source. It was a patch of deeper darkness, an elongated, amorphous shape that seemed to uncoil from the corner where the wall met the ceiling. It stretched slowly, unnaturally, like a long, thin limb made of pure void, reaching down toward the crib. It didn't touch it. It just hung there, retracting and extending in a slow, hypnotic rhythm that matched the cadence of the warped lullaby coming through the speaker. Tom's breath hitched in his throat. He wasn't recording. He was frozen, mesmerized by the silent, impossible visual on the screen. The shadow lingered for a full 10 seconds before shrinking back into the corner and vanishing completely. He didn't hesitate. He scrambled up the stairs, his mind screaming. He burst into the bedroom, flipping on the light. Anna jolted awake, clutching her chest. "Tom, what is it?" "Get up," he said, his voice a raw, desperate command. "Please, Anna, you have to see this." He pulled her from the bed, his urgency overriding her pained protests. He practically dragged her to the living room and sat her on the couch, shoving his laptop into her hands. He had the monitor's app, the one that stored video clips triggered by sound or motion. He scrolled frantically back to the correct timestamp. Don't look at me, don't ask questions, just watch the screen. Watch the wall behind her crib. He didn't say ghost, he didn't say entity. He framed it as he had to, as a problem for a scientist to observe. There is something wrong, something unexplainable is happening in that room. He hit play. The clip began. The whispering started, tinny and strange through the laptop speakers. Anna was about to speak, to dismiss it, but Tom put a finger to his lips. Watch, he hissed. And then it appeared. The shadow, uncoiling, stretching, a limb of pure darkness. Anna made a sound, a choked gasp. Her medical, rational mind, which had so easily explained away sounds and anxieties, had no explanation for this. She watched the shadow retract and vanish. The clip ended. The living room was silent. She looked up from the screen, her face ashen. The skepticism was gone, shattered. In its place was a deep, primal fear that mirrored his own. "My God, Tom," she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "What is that?" Belief was a cold comfort. Anna's acceptance didn't banish the fear. It validated and amplified it, giving it a new, shared weight. They were no longer a man on the edge of paranoia and his concerned wife. They were a family under siege. That night, they sat together on the living room floor, the laptop between them, re-watching the horrifying clip of the shadow. They pooled their knowledge, his frantic online research and her methodical scientific mind. "It's not a ghost," Anna said, her voice quiet but firm. "Human spirits in folklore are tied to emotion, to place, to unfinished business. This feels different." "Primal," Tom added, remembering the descriptions from the forums. "The post I found, they talked about it like a parasite, something drawn to newborns, to their energy, their vulnerability." They pieced it together, their hushed conversation a desperate attempt to define their enemy. It was a crib whisperer, as one terrified parent had called it, an entity that was fundamentally auditory. Sound was its medium, its method of influence, maybe even its nourishment. It would listen, learn the sounds of comfort, a shush, a coo, a lullaby, and then mimic them to get close, to soothe its target. "Why?" Anna whispered, staring at the monitor where Lily was sleeping, now a source of terror instead of reassurance. "What does it want?" "The forums were all over the place," Tom said, running a hand through his greasy hair. "Some thought it fed on their energy, their life force, like a psychic vampire. Others thought it was territorial, claiming the space. One person thought it wanted to trade places." The words hung in the air, sickening and monstrous. As if sensing their discovery, the entity's behavior escalated that very night. Its boldness was breathtaking. The whispers coming through the monitor were no longer fragmented or warped. They were clearer. They formed simple, possessive words. "Sleep, sleep now," the sibilant voice hissed, a chilling parody of a mother's comfort. "Hush, little one, mine." The final word, mine, sent a shockwave of ice through both of them. It was a claim, a declaration. Then they heard the clicking, not from the monitor speaker, but from the hallway just outside the living room. Click, 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 faint but undeniably present in the real world. They both froze, staring at the darkened doorway. It was here. It was no longer confined to the nursery or the electronic bridge connecting it. It was leaking into the rest of the house. Their attempts to fight back were pathetic and futile. Tom bought a brand new, top-of-the-line baby monitor, thinking the old one might be compromised. The whispers and clicks came through the new device just as clearly. Anna, falling back on old traditions she didn't even truly believe in, suggested playing soft classical music in the nursery, hoping to drown it out. The next night, they listened in horror as the entity wove Mozart's melodies into its own unsettling performance, a sibilant humming that followed the tune with perfect mocking precision. They tried leaving a Bible open on the changing table. The clicking from the monitor only seemed to grow more frantic and agitated, a sound of dry, rustling laughter. Nothing they did stopped it. Nothing they did deterred it. It was like trying to board up a window against the fog. Their enemy was patient, invasive, and learning more about them with every passing hour. It knew their voices, their lullabies, their fears, and it was getting stronger. The revelation came to Tom in the exhausted clarity of the pre-dawn hours. He was staring at the monitor, at the green light that had once been a comfort and was now a malevolent eye. He looked at the cable running to the wall, at the wireless signal indicator. "It's the monitor," he whispered, turning to Anna, who was dozing fitfully on the couch beside him. "Anna?" She blinked awake. "What?" "The monitor is the conduit," he said, the pieces clicking into place with a terrifying certainty. "It's not just a microphone. It's an invitation. It's an electronic bridge that lets this thing focus its influence. It's using our own vigilance against us. The more we listen, the more we give it a pathway." Anna stared at him, then at the monitor, and a look of dawning horror crossed her face. He was right. The entity was sound-based, and they had installed a high-fidelity 24/7 audio-visual pipeline directly into their child's cradle. They had to sever the connection, not by buying a new device, but by abandoning the very concept. Their plan was desperate, simple, and utterly terrifying. They would turn off the monitor, and they would spend the night in the nursery with Lily. That evening, they prepared for battle. They brought their pillows and thick duvets into the small room, creating a makeshift nest on the floor on either side of the crib. They unplugged the monitor camera, its little lens suddenly looking like a dead eye. They unplugged the white noise machine. They turned off every device. The ensuing silence was absolute, profound, and heavier than any sound they had ever heard. As darkness fell, the feeling of presence in the room was overwhelming. It was a suffocating pressure, a drop in temperature that seemed to move. They lay on their makeshift beds, not speaking, barely breathing, their eyes wide open in the dim glow of the single orange nightlight. Then the sounds began, not from a speaker, but from the room itself. A faint click-click scratch from inside the wall behind the crib, like a rat sharpening its claws on drywall. A cold spot drifted from one corner of the room to the other, raising goosebumps on Tom's arms. In the dim light, he saw a shadow in the corner of his eye, a flicker of movement near the ceiling that was gone when he turned his head. The entity was here, with them. It was confused, perhaps angered by the silence, by the removal of its electronic pathway. It was trying to get their attention, to provoke a reaction, to make them make a sound it could latch onto. The true test came around 3 a.m. Lily began to fuss. It started as a soft whimper, then grew into a nascent cry. Every parental instinct in Tom and Anna's bodies screamed at them to react, to shush her, to whisper, "It's okay," to sing the lullaby. But they realized in a shared moment of silent, horrifying clarity, that's what it did. That was its language. To make those sounds would be to invite it in, to give it the very thing it craved. Anna reached into the crib, her movements slow and deliberate. She didn't make a sound. She gently lifted Lily from the mattress and brought the baby into her nest of blankets. Tom watched, his body rigid with tension. Anna rocked her, stroking her back, comforting her only with touch and warmth. Lily's fussing began to quiet down, but the entity made its move. A sound came from directly beside Tom's head, so close he felt a cold vibration in the air. Sleep. It was a loud, clear, sibilant whisper, laced with a frustrated, predatory energy. It was no longer trying to imitate, it was commanding. Simultaneously, a furious, sharp series of clicks erupted from the ceiling directly above the crib. A desperate, angry tantrum of sound. Tom flinched violently, but held his ground, his eyes locked on Anna. She didn't react, her focus entirely on her daughter, on the silent act of comfort. They held their resolve. They denied the creature its stimulus. They laid there in the oppressive, charged silence, a human shield of quiet, waiting for the dawn. Dawn arrived not as a sudden event, but as a slow, merciful dilution of the darkness. The black square of the window softened to charcoal, then to a deep indigo, and finally to a pale, hopeful gray. With the first true rays of sunlight that streamed through the glass, the oppressive feeling in the room simply evaporated. The air grew lighter, the cold spots vanished. The silence was no longer heavy and charged, but peaceful and empty. Tom and Anna lay on the floor, utterly drained but alive, Lily sleeping soundly between them. They had survived. By denying the entity its medium, by refusing to engage on its terms, they had weathered the direct confrontation. The room felt like just a room again, a nursery, safe. That morning, they performed a solemn ritual. Tom took the baby monitor, the camera, the parent unit, the cords, and put them in a black trash bag. He didn't just throw it in the bin. He drove it to a public dumpster 2 towns over, as if disposing of a cursed object. They moved the crib into their own bedroom, placing it right beside their bed. The nursery at the end of the hall remained empty, its door firmly closed. They understood the terrifying paradox now. Some forms of technological vigilance don't eliminate threats. They create new vulnerabilities. The desire to see and hear everything had opened a door they never knew existed. Months passed. Life found a new, sleep-deprived rhythm, but one free of the specific, supernatural dread that had haunted them. They were tired, but it was the normal exhaustion of new parents. The fear receded, becoming a dark, unbelievable memory, a story they could never tell anyone. Lily grew, her coos turning into babbles, her sleepy sighs untroubled. The house was quiet, filled only with the mundane sounds of a young family. One evening, months later, Tom was rocking a fussy Lily to sleep in their bedroom. Anna was in the shower, the sound of the water a distant, soothing hum. The house was peaceful. He held Lily close, her warm, solid weight a comfort against his chest, and he began to hum the lullaby, Anna's lullaby, the one he had once heard twisted into a nightmare. He hummed it softly, reclaiming it, making it his own again. Lily's eyes drifted shut, her breathing evening out into the soft cadence of sleep. He finished the tune and leaned in, pressing his lips to her forehead, about to whisper, "I love you." And in that perfect silence, from the darkest corner of their bedroom, he heard it. Click, click. Impossibly faint, dry. A sound that should not have been there. He froze, his blood turning to ice water. His head snapped up, his eyes darting to the corner. There was nothing there but shadow and stillness. The sound was gone as quickly as it had come. A phantom? A memory? Or a reminder? He looked down at his sleeping daughter, his precious, vulnerable child. He pulled her impossibly tighter against his chest, a fierce, protective ache spreading through him. He understood then. The connection wasn't completely severed. They had closed the door, but the thing that waited on the other side was patient. It was still listening. And some things, once they know your name, never completely go away. Enjoyed the story? Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.